And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here each week meeting interesting people and talking about topical issues. And this week we have titled the show, The Strongest Helps the Weakest.
Yes, we're very pleased today to have Phil Pfister join us as our guest. He is in town doing some work for Chesapeake Energy, but Phil, in 2006, won the World's Strongest Man competition in China. He's here to tell us about that, but more importantly, really, he's here to talk about the work he does for Chesapeake, and he is the strongest helping the weakest because he is a very effective advocate to eradicate child abuse, and he's been doing it for a while now, and it's a very noble mission.
We want to hear more about Phil's work, and we'll get to it right after this. You're watching The Verdict.
In driving rain, blistering heat, and bitter cold, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, Chesapeake drills non-stop for natural gas on American soil. Chesapeake drills more new gas wells than anyone else, and from those wells collects the most drilling information and acquires more 3D seismic images, leveraging every efficiency to improve the odds of finding more natural gas every day with every well we drill. The better job we do of discovering bigger reserves of clean-burning American natural gas, the greater the prosperity of our nearby communities, our state, and our nation. And as long as there are more gas reserves to be found here in the U.S., we will never rest. Chesapeake. Natural gas wins the day.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma Realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Very pleased today to have a very special guest from Charleston, West Virginia, Phil Pfister. Phil was the 2006 World's Strongest Man Championship winner in China. He is a native of Charleston, West Virginia, attended West Virginia State University, has been active in both the mental health fields and early childhood education, and has kind of developed a passion for trying to eradicate or at least minimize child abuse. That's why he's here in Oklahoma City to visit with Chesapeake. He is a representative of Chesapeake Energy, one of our good Verdict sponsors that we're very proud of. He was the first American to win the World's Strongest Man competition in 24 years. And there hasn't been an American win since Phil did in 2006. We're sure pleased you're here. We're pleased with what you're doing, and we're glad you'd give us some time. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Have you been to Oklahoma much?
This is actually my first trip to Oklahoma City.
What do you think so far?
I've had an awesome time. I've been here a few days, and I've got a couple more days. And, you know, everywhere I go, wherever I travel, the best part is meeting new friends, and I've been able to do a lot of that, so it's been great.
Well, there's a lot of men in the world. What prompted you to want to be the strongest of them all?
You know, growing up, I always knew that I was athletic and strong, but I was never really a football player or baseball or basketball player. I was more into individual sports. As a kid, I rode BMX bikes and skateboards and snow skied and water skied and snowboarded, that kind of stuff. And played a lot in my tree house in the woods and stuff like that. And I never really found my niche athletically until I was 27 years old. I was introduced to strongman contests.
Now, strongman competition, I think people are familiar with bodybuilding and weightlifting. Where does the strongman competition come? Is it one of those two, or is it a third category?
No, it's very different. Bodybuilding is, of course, almost a beauty contest, really. Weightlifting, whether it's powerlifting or Olympic lifting, involve using a barbell. And as typical folk, we don't relate to barbells well. 300-pound barbell looks like a 600-pound barbell. It's a very abstract thing. So in strongman, we try to use something that we can all relate to, pulling 18-wheelers, sometimes 2 at a time, or lifting giant boulders, or flipping over cars, or carrying cars. So we try to use real-world objects that everyone can relate to rather than these abstract things like barbells.
Phil, I know your stats are interesting. 6'6", 349 pounds. When you competed in 2006, were you about the same size, or were you bigger? Or?
Relatively the same size. I may have put on 5 or so pounds since then. I was around 352, I think, when I won, and I may go a little heavier than that sometimes.
Well, we're going to see a video here in a minute of some of the events, but looking back on it, what would you say was the most difficult event that you had to compete in?
Oh, gee, you know, all of these things are super tough, and it's like anything in life that's challenging. You know, there are learning curves to all this stuff, and you know, you just do your homework beforehand, and
a lot of practice, I guess.
Yeah, you turn it over to God when you get there, and just go out there and do your best. And if you end up first or last, hopefully you can still walk away with your chin held high. And I was just, you know, grateful to be touched by God's grace that day. And, you know, a lot of hard work finally paid off. So it's gratifying to finally, at least one time, make it to the top of the mountain. But it's been a heck of a lot of fun, and I'm not done yet.
This didn't have much to do with what we're talking about, but I just can't help but ask you, are you a big eater? I mean, are most of the guys in the strongest competitions, did the people that own the buffets,
You know,
like, hate to see you guys coming
I have
in?
to take in 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day on
I'd say
average.
that's a big eater.
And when I'm training, I really have to be up around the 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 calorie mark. When I'm really focused and training hard, just to have an energy level, you've got to
And
get
so
in.
you're burning that up when you're pulling 18-wheelers and that type of thing. You're burning up all
actually,
these
the
calories.
metabolism stays elevated for. When you strength train, it stays elevated for 24 hours or longer, as opposed to when you're running, biking, or swimming, your metabolism drops almost immediately after that kind of training and activity.
We've got a videotape that I think explains a little bit more about Phil Pfister and his background and what he's all about. Let's take a look at some videotape now.
We live in a world where people are desperate for heroes, for leaders who seek more than just fame, who genuinely want to make a difference in our lives. You may not know him, but Phil Pfister is a hero with a heart that's even bigger than his 6'6" body and 350-pound body mass. Phil Pfister is the picture of pure power. In August 2006, halfway around the world in Sanya, China, Phil was on the brink of making history, trying to become the first American in more than 20 years to claim the title, World's Strongest Man. It wasn't easy, but then again, the best things in life never are. After 3 grueling days of intense competition, lifting cars, hoisting quarter-ton pipes, carrying monstrous boulders, and pushing his body far beyond its maximum limit,
He has done it!
it all came down to one event.
Remember the conditions, a wet surface. The stones are soaked.
9 years of training, culminating in 10 seconds of pure strength, adrenaline, and heart.
Even with him, it is going to come down to the final stone. 353 pounds to decide the winner. And it's Pfister. American Phil Pfister has done it. He has won the title of the world's strongest man.
Phil Pfister stood above athletes from every corner of the globe, the strongest men in the world, all looking up at the new champion. Few people in life are true champions, but Phil defines what it means to be a natural champion on the field of competition and in the arena of life. Phil's story is one of strength, integrity, and compassion. He has a sense of duty, a desire to use his exceptional achievement to do something lasting, something worthwhile, something extraordinary. Phil has a cause, and it is important to all of us. His message is simple. We are all strong enough to stop child abuse. Children are his passion, protecting them his mission. When Phil joined Chesapeake Energy's corporate development team in 2007, he brought with him a level of commitment that promises to redefine how our society views, nurtures, and embraces society's most defenseless members, precious little children. And in the end, that is real power, the strong helping the weak. That is Phil Pfister, a powerhouse with the heart, compassion, and commitment to be a real superhero, to help stop the abuse of children. And he wants to recruit all of us to join his army of protectors.
All we have is right now. Won't you join me in my army of protectors, my armies of advocates? I need your help. Please remember, working together, we can all be strong enough to help end child abuse. Thank you.
That's Phil Pfister. We'll be back with more on the verdict right after this.
Blankenship is stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leaving it 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins in to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
Okiwani is an Indian name for a place where children play. When we obtained the camp, we found a lot of oil debris left in the woods. We saw a commercial about how the oil and natural gas industry cleans up old oil well sites. We called the OERB and they agreed to remove tons of concrete and steel. It didn't cost us a thing. Thousands of children have left their footprints on this land. Thanks to the oil and gas industry, they will for a long time to come.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers with the world's strongest man, Phil Pfister. And Phil has been an outspoken proponent of bringing attention to child abuse, Kent.
Yes, what motivated you, Phil, to get involved in that? We've titled the show, The Strongest Helping the Weakest.
You know, I think all of us are horrified, you know, when we hear on the radio or see on the nightly news or read about it in the newspaper, you know, a little guy dying, you know, 1, 2, 3 years old, sometimes not even a year old. And, you know, it could be anybody who's the perpetrator. It could be a sports star or someone, you know, who's under a lot of economic or mental pressure. You know, it could be a sophisticated individual or a non-sophisticated individual. And it just cuts me to the core. Few things, nothing really makes me as upset inside. And since becoming a father over 7 years ago, I think I've become more sensitive to it. There's nothing that compares to it.
What specifically are you doing about it in your hometown of Charleston, West Virginia, or in Oklahoma City or anywhere else?
Well, I'm trying to identify the different organizations to support and trying to get a sense of how to support them, and not so much with funding meetings that lead to more meetings, but trying to identify tangible ways that I can make a difference, and that contribution, financial support can also make a difference through Chesapeake Energy. I'm very fortunate to be in a role at Chesapeake where it's my job to be one of the voices, one of the faces for Chesapeake that fulfills this long history of corporate citizenship, this ethos that they have there. So, you know, it's a big challenge to climb the learning curve of understanding this problem, this phenomenon, and figuring out the best ways to deal with what seems like, you know, insurmountable, you know, problem.
Mm-hmm. What can community leaders, like here in Oklahoma City or in Tulsa, where we also broadcast, what can community leaders do to try to motivate?
It's really ironic that you ask, because you and your friend Don Nicholson, I think, started Oklahoma Lawyers for Children 10 years ago, and you guys have over 450 legal volunteers and over 200 sort of layperson volunteers. And I'm going to follow your example back home and try to get some of my lawyer friends to be inspired by that, and some of my other friends within the community to be inspired by that, and copy Oklahoma Lawyers for Children back home. There's BACA, Bikers Against Child Abuse. There are all these different volunteer organizations that individuals can get involved with, and all these great organizations began with just a single individual seeing a way to get involved. But really, it's the responsibility of government and civic leaders to fulfill the requirements of the law, and to push for greater standards of the law to protect victims of abuse and punish those, you know, who perpetrate abuse. But ultimately, it's very important to try to develop a sophisticated understanding of the problem, and it's taking me months, you know, or years even, to begin to understand some of the complex issues going on there, because it's not just child abuse, it's also neglect. And when, you know, we think of child abuse, that typical response is to think of kind of a horror film sicko who gets off on torturing people or children, and that's just not the way it is, fortunately, in most cases. You know, there are a lot of very complex problems. I think in the 70s, the federal government disassembled all the mental institutions that house people, you know, their whole lives. So we've done away with that. So we have a lot of mentally retarded, mentally ill folks that are becoming parents, and a lot of times they don't have necessary community supports, and a lot of times they're homeless. And these people, unfortunately, just aren't sophisticated enough as parents, and a lot of times that causes child neglect, which can be maybe even a greater problem than abuse, because the neglect victims who've never been held and nurtured, they don't develop the same psychological parameters that most of us grow up with, and they can't form bonds and function in society, and they don't thrive in society. A lot of times the abuse victims, they have a much better chance of recovering from abuse and later becoming productive adults. So that, you know, we tend to think also, oh, this is just something that's been underreported for a long time. But no, it's something that's really growing. You've seen in the last 10 years that things have doubled. You know, we think of it as a meth problem, or an alcoholism problem, or a drug abuse problem, or you know, an illness problem, or a retardation problem. It's all those things and many more. You know, as intelligent, successful adults, we have a lot of supports in place, but we know how difficult daily life can be sometimes, whether it's relationships with our spouses, relationships at work, or relationships with our children. It's a struggle, and it's tough to cope with these things. But if you've got lack of economic opportunity on top of that, lack of educational exposure, lack of sophistication in general, if you don't have those opportunities as a parent, you can imagine how difficult it is for a lot of these individuals to function. And if they've never had that role modeling to demonstrate good parenting, if they've never had that in their own lives, a lot of times in these family units, you know, abuse is the norm, you know, because they're just not sophisticated people that have grown up with the supports and the precautions that a lot of us take for granted. So it's up to churches, it's up to individuals, it's up to everybody in the community to develop this sort of sophisticated understanding of what you might think of as a simple problem. But we've got to develop a sophisticated understanding and find ways to reach out to these individuals and empower these powerless children to stop being victims, and empower these these struggling, unsophisticated parents to care for their children in the best way possible. And also we have to find foster parents when it just doesn't work.
Let me ask you, I was interested in reading and getting ready for today's show that you have a background not only, I mean, you're speaking about child abuse, but you don't just come to it as a raw layman. You have a background in mental health, you have a background in early childhood education. How did that earlier training help you?
And I also worked as a firefighter for about 9 years, but I worked in a daycare center with 6 through 12-year-olds for several years in the before school program and after school programs. I also worked in a mental health facility managing employees who dealt with live-in clients who had developmental delays as well as mental illness. And you know, I think it's probably
about 30 seconds left, Phil.
You know, all those things in life that just teach you lessons that you can apply every day.
Okay. Well, Phil, we appreciate you coming on the show very much, and obviously we're
Thank you very
impressed
much,
with your
Mayor.
work, not only as the world's
Thank you,
strongest
Phil.
man, but what you're
Thank you,
doing
sir.
now to help those defenseless kids out there who might be neglected or abused.
Thank you for your work, and I'll come back anytime.
All right, Phil Pfister.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
World's strongest man. Kent and I'll be right back with a final word.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers wrapping up a show with Phil Pfister, the world's strongest man in 2006, now doing some great work with kids.
I think the picture I liked best on that video we saw about Phil was Phil holding his little 7-month-old son at the time when he was 7 months old. And this giant of a man gently holding a child. Now that kind of image can bring a strong impression to people who Phil is trying to motivate to get involved in preventing child abuse. He is powerful and has a powerful message.
Kent, you've been very involved with the child abuse, child neglect, and some efforts in that regards. We in Oklahoma, are we doing better? Are we catching up to the problem?
Oh, we're not catching up at all. We're doing about as well as everybody can. We're running as fast as we can. This is not meant to be critical of anyone. But Mick, you might, and our viewers might like to know that in Oklahoma County alone, we have more children in foster care because of child abuse than 17 other states have total.
And again, we want to thank Phil Pfister for coming on the show. We'd also like to draw your attention to a couple of websites. First of all, you can get more information about Phil and his fabulous work at chk.com. Go through Chesapeake's website and find more about Phil Pfister and his work with kids. And also head out to our website, theverdict.tv. Tell us about a show you'd like to see or a guest you'd like to meet. Kent and I'll be back next week with another show, and we'll see you then.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.